Hi, folks. Tim Sundles here, coming from Africa, and excuse our technical issues we have in Africa. We have a bunch of them here, and this is only our second or third live video, so we are still learning. But today, I want to talk about the deep state when it comes to wildlife. And the story I will tell you, I'll just warn you right up front, you're not going to believe. Uh, but it certainly happened. And I'm leaving 90% of it out and just giving you the details. Oh, yeah. In Idaho Falls and Boise. It was some of this was on the 5 o'clock news 3, 4, 5 nights in a row. I know Rush Limbaugh picked up some of this in his newsletter. Uh, it was in the what do they call the press that goes around the world? Anyway, it was covered. That was not my plan. It just got covered. So let's talk about the government weaponizing wildlife to take away your rights. And it's actually not a new thing. I think it was in the 1970s that the Endangered Species Act was passed by Congress. Um, and instantly, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service started using it against people. If you were a farmer or a rancher and somebody found a three-tailed, five-eyed, screw-nosed titmouse in your field, all of a sudden you lost your property rights. You couldn't plow those fields. You couldn't run cattle in them. I mean, and you know, they did this over and over and over to Americans and hurt the U.S. citizenry. One of the things that they do that's a hoax, and I'm telling you, it's a hoax. It's a money grab and a freedom grab and an anti-gun move. Um, one of the things they do is reintroductions of various species. Let's start. So keep in mind, I lived my whole adult life in the Rocky Mountains, in Montana, Idaho, some in New Mexico, some in Colorado. And when they reintroduced wolves, that was probably 1994 in Idaho, it was just down the road from my house. And the Sierra Club and other groups that partnered with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife were seen by friends of mine that were there at the first wolf relief taking a toast to the end of the blood sport of hunting in the Rocky Mountains. That's a quote. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service had very much colluded with the tree hugger groups in the wolf reintroduction, and it was in fact a move against sportsmen, against hunting, against self-independence, against gun ownership. I mean, if you can eliminate hunting, there are some people that just won't own a gun, and the government didn't have to make any attack at all on the Second Amendment. All they had to do was eliminate hunting. So I'm going to name a couple of the culprits. The man in charge, and I'm doing this by memory, the man in charge of the wolf reintroduction plan for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was Ed Bangs. Ed Bangs got the Idaho Fish and Game commissioner at the time, director, well, not commissioner, excuse me, director Conley, to sign the permit to allow wolves to be dumped in Idaho. Well, there's a couple of problems with this. Director Conley went on to get federal appointments and other state appointments as head of departments after he left Idaho. And he skedaddled out of Idaho when his term was up after he allowed wolves in. Well, every time he would go on to get another appointment, be it federal or state, he would get the big pensions and the big bonus packages. And I don't know how much Director Conley retired with of your tax money, but he probably gets many hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in his pensions. And this is the way states buy out, or excuse me, the feds buy out state officials to get them to do their bidding. They promise them lots of money. It's your money, not theirs, but that's what they do. So they introduced these wolves very near my house, and I could tell you dozens and dozens of stories. One of the big lies that Ed Banks told, and it's just one of many, is that wolves only kill the sick and the weak. Of course, what's the weakest in an elk herd? The babies. What's the next weakest? Oh, the pregnant mothers. So, yeah, in that context, that's what the wolves kill, is the babies and the pregnant mothers. You know, I when the snow gets deep and crusts over, the wolves can run on top of it with their big padded feet. The elk's sharp, heavy hooves, because they're heavy bodied, crash through the snow, and they tire very quickly, lunging in belly deep snow to get away from wolves. It just doesn't work for the elk. It works great for the wolves. And I have personally seen hundreds in the first several years of the wolf reintroduction, hundreds of elk pulled down in the snow, killed, and not eaten. I mean, just really sad. I've seen elk stumbling around the woods with big chunks of their hind quarters missing, yet they're still alive and they will starve and freeze. And all these people these tree hugger groups, like the Sierra Club, that do this kind of thing, they don't care about the wildlife. They say they do. But if wolves do what I'm telling you they do, and they do a lot more than that, how can they be advocating for animals? I'd like to know. So anyway, um, I would say that Idaho's elk population in the first 15 years of the wolf reintroduction was reduced by, at least in the areas in the mountains that I frequented, was reduced by about 75%. The historic Yellowstone Pack in Gardner, Montana has been reduced by probably 90%, still is. Um, wolves are protected in the park, which is a farce. They shouldn't be in the park. One of the big corrupt things that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service did was they brought these Canadian gray wolves in to the Rocky Mountains, flat out knowing that the original and still very small populations of existing Rocky Mountain wolves, who were the original wolf inhabitants of the Rockies below the Canadian border, they brought in Canadian greys and dumped them on us, not Rocky Mountain wolves. That's illegal. That's not a species reintroduction. They wiped out the rest of the Rocky Mountain wolves by dumping a larger wolf in our forests that killed the remaining Rocky Mountain wolves. I mean, there is so much corruption going on here. The wolves, and Ed Bangs knew this, the wolves carried fatal parasites that are fatal to humans, and there have been some human deaths from these parasites. Once they infect a human's brain, and they're infecting the wildlife all over Idaho. I mean, there are all kinds of parasite deaths of Idaho wildlife. And if you eat it, not cooked sufficiently, or if you handle the wolf's feces, or if you step on it and then take your shoes off later with your hands, what else are you going to use? You can get these parasites. And several people have, and some have died from it. And Idaho Fish and Game is so shameless. They had their own biologists handling a lot of these dying animals, knowing that these parasites could be transferred to humans and knowing that they could kill humans. When Idaho got called on the carpet about that some 15 or 20 years ago, it had to be a huge embarrassment for them. Anyway, here's a story that happened to me. I took my then wife, and I'm talking about probably 2001 or maybe the year 2000, on a pack trip into the Rocky Mountains, into the Frank Church River of No Return, which is the largest wilderness area in the lower 48, and it's contiguous with the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness Area, which is the second largest wilderness area in the lower 48. So you're talking about massive amounts of wild Rocky Mountain habitat. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service tried to get funding for this from Congress. Congress turned them down. And I at one time had an original copy of the environmental impact statement that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service put together to give to Congress. And it was a pack of lies. And you know, they said, for example, we had 600,000 elk and deer in that area of Idaho. We didn't. We had about 200,000. And these are known facts. They may not be known facts to you, and they may not be known facts that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service wants known, but these are the kind of tactics they stoop to. Congress turned them down on the funding. So what did they do to get money? They stole it from the Pittman Robertson tax fund, which is a tax you pay, a hidden tax you pay on every firearm purchase, every ammunition purchase, archery purchase, fishing gear. That tax is in a lot of just about all the outdoor sporting goods that you buy. It's a hidden tax. They call it an excise tax. And they have the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service presiding over the use of this tax. I mean, that's not like the fox guarding the hen house. It's like the freaking pack of foxes in the hen house. So anyway, it's one thing that Donald Trump says that he wants to end is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's ability to control the Pittman or Pittman Robertson tax fund. I don't remember which. Anyway, I took my wife on a pack trip, and this would have been, like I said, 2000, way back into the Frank Church wilderness. Um, we brought horses and mules. We set up a camp, and my plan was to do some hiking up into the high mountain lakes. Some of those lakes, which to this day remain unnamed, there's no trails going to them. And I had fished them myself, hiking around. I've been hiking around the woods, the Rocky Mountains, my whole life. And so I wanted to get her up there and get a little bit of hiking done and fishing. And as we were leaving camp, I just got a really bad feeling. I had my horses tied on a high line for the day, which means they can't get away. And I just got a really bad feeling. And I was wearing in a shoulder holster one of my 500 line bars. And I told her we got about 100 meters down the trail, and I told her, I said, I need to go back and get my rifle. I got a bad feeling. So I went back to my tent, picked up my rifle, which was a Marlin model 1895. It's a lever action, chambered in 4570. We started down the trail we were camped on, and we were going to just go a quarter mile, leave the trail, and head straight up the mountain with no trail to some lakes I knew about. We get about 100 meters out of camp, and here comes a large wolf sneaking up on my horses. He didn't see me. He was focused on my horses. Well, little did I know he was radio collared. I think his collar number was B59, if I recall correctly. And I also didn't know that he had a pack with him. Now, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who counts wolves, and there's no way to do that in the forest in straight up and down mountains, said, and I found this out after the fact, that is the Twin Peaks pack, and it had 7 wolves in it. Well, that's interesting because I ended up killing 15 of them, and I saw at least 7 or 8 more after that. And statute of limitations is run out, and I don't really care. I've killed more wolves than anybody I know. Um, so, and by the way, it didn't hurt their numbers at all. The wolves were populating so fast, they just kept reproducing over and over and over and over. So it didn't killing them and trying to save our wildlife, which is what I was trying to do, and trying to stop federal and state tyranny, using wildlife as a weapon to destroy property rights and other human rights. I mean, that wildlife belongs to Idaho citizens, doesn't belong to the feds, doesn't belong to the state. It belongs to us. So I see this wolf sneaking up on our horses. So I thought, fine, I'm just going to shoot this stupid thing. It's going to kill our horses while we're gone. So I couldn't really take a shot because the timber was thick. We were in lodgepole, and it turned and saw me and headed straight at me. And little did I know, it had been captured more than twice by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, recollared. It had been into wildlife about 100 miles from, or not, into domestic cattle about 100 miles from there, and had killed cattle. So it wasn't fond of people. It saw me and turned and just came straight at me. Well, my wife and I had drilled on, if I ever get attacked by wildlife, get out of my way. Don't be close to me. Certainly don't touch me. Just run away from me, because if you throw me off balance with my firearm, I may miss, and there may only be time for one shot, if that. So when this wolf charged, she saw me raise my rifle, and I was swinging the rifle like you do if you know how to hit running targets. And I was swinging in her direction because she was a little bit between me and the wolf. So she dove to the ground, and that might be the smartest thing that woman ever did. She didn't do very many smart things. She dove to the ground, and as the wolf then turned and went after her because she was moving, I killed it at 4 feet, I don't know, 5 feet, uh, uh, on the ground. The rest of the pack started howling, and I hadn't even seen the rest of the pack, and they were howling all around us. So what these wolves had done is they had followed our horse tracks in from the trailhead 16 miles. I don't know where the wolves picked up our scent, but they had followed our tracks in, and they were just looking for wolf supper or horse supper. I mean, that's, it would have been actually breakfast this time in the morning. It was real early. And so I put another shell in my rifle, and I got very angry. And my wife said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm going to kill them all." And I said, if they would have killed our horses while we were gone, because there was a whole pack of them, what's that? Well, yeah, well, wolves can't kill me. I'm always armed and I can shoot. So screw the wolves. They can't kill me. Um, anyway, I looked at her, and she was pale white. She's just white as a ghost. And this woman was scared of everything. I mean, everything scared her. And she was shivering and shaking. And she said, "Don't leave me." So I mean, I said, "Just go back in the tent. You'll be fine." And she's like, "Please don't leave me." Well, okay. So the wolves were spared that day. they stayed around our camp and howled for an hour. And I decided to go public with this because I felt it was my public duty, actually, because the next person coming down that trail could have been a lady with two little kids backpacking or something. And, I mean, I just felt responsible to say wolves do attack people. I mean, because another one of Ed Bang's lies is wolves aren't a threat to people. Of course, historically, there's lots of accounts of wolves killing people. So I didn't know that at the time. I was not a wolf expert at the time. Um, so I went public with it at a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service sponsored wolf reintroduction meeting, which was a place where they just spread lies for the public to get public approval to reintroduce wolves. I went public with it. I called the sheriff first and told him what had happened. And I said, I'm going to go public with it, have some deputies there, because if anybody tries to arrest me, um, there's going to be shooting. And I mean, I'm not going to be arrested for defending my life, my duty. And he said, okay, we'll have some deputies there. So at this meeting, I told the story, and everybody just blew into an upheaval. They wanted to know what the radio caller number. Um, the materials, nylon material, they hold these collars on with is, and these are radio telemetry. They're not satellite. They can't track everywhere the wolf goes. Inside the laminate nylon is an antenna for radio telemetry, and these are high energy batteries. I didn't know any of this at the time, so I tried cutting through the side of the collar. I can't cut through it because there's metal antenna, so I cut through the other side. And the reason I can tell you this story is statute of limitations, long and explode. I mean, they really explode when you do that. So, yeah, put them in a safe place and shoot them at the best way to dispose of them. I go public. Next thing I know, I'm contacted by our U.S. senators. One of them was at the meeting, Crapo, and I don't know, and I can't remember their names. The other guy is the guy that got arrested in the airport for soliciting a homosexual affair. And my wife, by the way, called that when she met him. Both I left it up in the mountains, and it was hot. Over again, I tell my senators to get a real job. Start trying to make a difference. Don't be a phony senator, because they didn't accomplish anything on this, and they never do accomplish anything. They live for sound bites, in my opinion, and I've seen plenty of it since. So I agreed to take 2 U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service law enforcement, there didn't even be such a thing, back in the wilderness and give them their wolf carcass. Well, before I went down, I'm doing all this by memory. He called me, he said, Tim, I deal with these pricks on stuff. You can't defend your reputation. And I said, Sheriff,